Let me just very quickly highlight a few facts which might help us to fuel the discussion in the panel later on. So the subject is, how can we transform the existing utilities into green energy supplying utilities? First of all, let's reflect a little bit. What is today's practice? Today's practice is that electricity is dispatched to match the demand at the lowest cost. On the left side, you see a typical dispatch curve, and the associated variable production costs are shown there, and the energy is delivered to match the lowest cost possible at a certain point in time. On the right side, you see this, including the renewable energy and the subsidies from the renewable energy law in Germany. This is the status. The question is, how will the future look like? So first of all, we have a particular challenge in Germany. First of all, we have to acknowledge that this country has an extraordinary high share of industry and production compared to most other economies of the world. And the difference compared to other economies has been rising in the recent years, as you might see there above. So about 44% plus some other percentage from other business is going to industry. Electricity supply to industry is one of the biggest challenges in Germany. And at the same time, what is important, electricity supply, electricity prices for industry has to be cost competitive. Otherwise, industry production will not maintain in this country. This is one of our key challenges. And how can we match this? By the use of more renewable energy, a big challenge. So if we look on different industries, we easily see that some of them have a cost share of energy up to 80%, aluminium, but also on the right side, if you look to the chemicals, many chemicals have energy cost up to 50% of the total cost. So very, very important factor to match these costs in a competitive way. And it is not any solution that this production, which is the backbone of the German economy, is relocated to any other place. That doesn't help anything. Unless we use aluminium, unless we use plastics somewhere, we have to acknowledge it will be produced somewhere, and just relocating doesn't help. We have to solve the problem here. This is a reflection taken from the recent studies of the German government, from the energy strategy. This is the way forward, one scenario which also incorporates that there will be more energy efficiency, so the total demand is declining a little bit, and you see how the conventional power generation is step by step replaced by renewable energy, and this may even be accelerated after these recent incidents. Big challenge to come. So now, how can we match, and this is important, the match demand of the customers? And we should not forget the customers. Energy supply has to match the demand of the customers. On the left side, you see the profiles, the load curves, which is provided by different sources of renewable energy. And unfortunately, the most popular ones, solar and wind, are pretty volatile. So they do not really contribute to baseload, whereas there are other renewable energy sources which have a good baseload characteristics, like hydropower, which cannot much be extended, but also geothermal. So this is a fact. And the other thing is, on the right side, you see, if we take the reflections which we already have from the German federal government, we see that the installed capacity for renewables will increase drastically and rapidly. You've seen this before. But the impact on secured capacity is very, very small in the current scenario. So we do not really have baseload available. And this is one of the biggest challenges which we have to solve. So it is about, what can we do? More control energy, energy storage enhanced, other new renewable energy sources which fit better to this picture, or very innovative solution which we heard yesterday from Intelios. So, and we have to look on the portfolio in a truly holistic way. the increase of renewables means it has an impact on all the other sources in the energy supply portfolio. And finally, we have to see this is associated with heavy investment needs into the infrastructure. That shows the impact of the feed-in of wind power in different scenarios. So the costs go up exponentially, and we have to find ways to finance this in an economic way, and of course to supply energy much more smartly than we do it today. So innovation is really key to make that challenge happen. So in brief words, this is my introduction, and I think the other panelists will have comments to this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joerg. Let's bring in 3 more smart green minds with a simple question. Who are you and what do you do? Give us a 1-minute elevator pitch. And then I have a second question, maybe in a second round. Is the oligopoly that we have in Germany and many other countries good for the transformation, or is this already one of the key problems that we are facing? Andre.
My name is Shortell. I'm a partner at GP Bullhound, which is a boutique investment bank specializing in the clean tech sector. We're quite active in the world of the smart grid, right across the value chain. And should we go on to the questions? Or?
Yeah, okay, let's do first the short elevator pitch, yeah.
My name is Werner, and I'm the director of Greenpeace Energy, which is a cooperative taking care of green electricity, and we're also building wind farms and solar power stations. And we start this year to deliver gas. We will use hydrogen, which is performed from wind electricity into the gas system, and we will offer this to our customers. We have about 100,000 customers in Germany, and right now we are growing very fast, unfortunately.
I hear they are giving you calls all day long, right? How many new customers during the last 2 weeks?
The last 2 weeks we gained 5,000 customers.
5,000 customers?
Yes.
Wow.
Nice.
With not doing, we just skipped all advertising and so on, because it's not appropriate in this situation to gain profit of this catastrophe. But it's unbelievable what we have on responses from the public.
Give it a round of applause. Rolf.
Rolf Adam. I'm with Cisco Systems, and I'm responsible for our utility business here in Europe. One of our focus areas clearly is smart grid. This is why we're here today. Now, Cisco, we've built the internet. What do we want to do with a smart grid? Smart grid is all about information, intelligence, applications, and all of that needs communication. So we are there to build the communication backbone for the smart grid.
All right, Joerg, you worked for big guys, the big utilities in Germany. Now you are a consultant and investor and soon entrepreneur again, building a new entity. We talked about it. So from your experience, what is happening in these big companies? Why aren't they 100% renewable like some of the new players? Greenpeace Energy actually already showed us it is possible, and if you have such a strong position in the market and things happen in the world, then people start calling you, customers run after you. So what is the situation inside the big utilities?
So there's certainly a challenge and a problem, and there are also some good news. The challenge and the problem is certainly that so much capital is linked and invested in old technology already. And that would mean that a lot of capital needs to be written off, and no one should be so much in favor of this, at least not the shareholders of these companies. That is one challenge indeed. And the good news is indeed that most of the companies which I know now very seriously work on new technology, on new energy resources. They all have formed out divisions for renewable energy. They all are now very interested, engaged into smart grids, and these. So they are changing. But we have to understand, at the same time, these are stock-listed companies. They have shareholders who want to have reasonable returns, and if they have to write off a lot of old technology too quickly, then it is a certain challenge and burden for them. That's the situation.
But in the end, it must be written off at one day, right?
Yeah, that's it's a matter how fast. Yes, yes.
Any comments on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the power industry is one industry that's had a business model that's endured for 80 years. You produce power, you pump it out, and you get paid per unit of power. And it's so when you compare it to other industries, it's been remarkably stable and free of volatility. I think it's converging, and we're at a sort of a turning point where there's already been a mix with gas and with water, so utilities are starting to adopt a broader footprint. And I think to develop a model where it's less monolithic and less vertical, it may be more horizontal, be more open to other standards, more open to innovation of young companies. So I see no barrier in the future as to why it couldn't link up with communications. I think the big challenge now is how does the DNA in the management teams that run power companies actually change? And that's going to be a process. I think the debates we've seen, is it evolutionary or revolutionary? If you ask Infotech, they prefer revolutionary. If it's the power companies, it's more evolutionary.
Well, I think one of the basic problems of the whole energy industry is, and regardless if you are a big player or if you are a small utility of a community, the basic problem is that the basement of the business model is selling energy as much as possible. If you sell a lot of energy, you will get a lot of money. And this is a major problem, because if you sell services, if you sell some products for efficiency, the value chain will end up as soon as the efficiency is installed. Then it's end up, and that's a problem. Just a few weeks ago, I was talking to on a round table to heads of local utilities, and I said, well, even Angela Merkel wants to reduce the energy consumption by 20% in 2022 or 12%. Even the EU, Mr. Oettinger, he was talking about 3% reduction per year, which is a lot. And I was talking to them and say, well, how do you transfer this in your community? Why don't you say 20% reduction, 10% reduction by 2020? And they looked at me and they said, are you crazy? You want me get fired? Listen, with selling electricity and gas, I pay all swimming pools in community, I pay the kindergarten, I pay all the parking houses I have to run as a utility. So that's one of the basic problems in this whole business case, electricity, and I include also gas, let's say energy. And we have to find a way to get out of this function. And we have to find another function, because I totally agree that the energy sector still needs to be a sector with margin, with profits. Otherwise, you cannot finance a transformation. But we have to be creative how we can step out of this mechanism. If you sell a lot of electricity, you will be very successful.
There's only one
can we make electricity more expensive? On the one hand, and on the other hand, we reduce the amount of electricity. Wouldn't that be a simple economic way forward?
Yes, but it's not really worked out, because we have to make another difference in this discussion. It's about the investment costs and the variable costs we have. And renewable energies will have very, very low variable costs. That means we need a completely different mechanism and function about the price building we have now in Europe, because the price building always hits on the variable costs, and we have to turn this around. So renewable energies will get a different price in the market than fossil or nuclear power. And that's another big issue. It's probably worth a whole conference.
Okay,
but,
Rolf.
I think there's only one catch with that. If your organization is gone tomorrow, honestly, nobody cares, and that doesn't have an impact on the energy system that we have. If E.ON won't be there tomorrow, or RWE, then we won't have electricity around here.
Yes, exactly.
And that is really it's not that Tyson and Crossman don't like renewables. It's not that they don't want to change. They are responsible for a well-oiled machine that has been running for the past 100 years. If you look at what happened at Barings Bank, there was a single trader who brought on an institution that was 200 years ago considered one of the 5 forces of Europe: Russia, Prussia, France, United Kingdom, and Barings Bank. Now, you want to go down in history as the engineer that ruined and broke the well-oiled machine? It's a transition, and we need to give them time. And I mean, the conversation that we had the entire morning, innovation needs capital. And those are the institutions that do have the capital, that are willing to make the change, but we do need to give them time, not for their benefit, but for our benefit, to actually make that transition into the new world.
May I,
Please.
one additional comment, perhaps. There are really good signs of hope that the attitude, even of the larger utilities, is changing. For example, RWE has formed out an efficiency unit, which sells efficiency services to the clients. If you look at their recent marketing campaigns, this is very much about smart home, to do this efficiently. So the transition is already a little bit underway. The question is indeed, how fast can it be managed? This is the real question.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it also has to take a part of customer relevance. I mean, when you see the peaks that you had on there, and in the US, there's a lot of demand response, where a customer will actually be paid by the power company to not use power at a certain day. And that's a significant sum, but that's only a portion of what the power company can save, because the peak power is a hugely expensive issue. So that's one piece of value add that starts to break through. I think the other piece I'd say is that the utility companies are, as you say, slowly starting to open to innovation, but that is just a small crack compared to where it needs to go, because it really is not an industry that's had to have innovation. I mean, for example, where you hear a lot of talk about innovation, because of the vertical nature, small companies can't go and work with one power company. They need to have contracts with 3 or 4 power companies. When they do, they will have the venture industry and the banks coming after them, because they need customer diversification. So that's a sea change which the utilities have not really had to allow up until now. I think the other thing utilities could do is, I heard earlier on wind farms, once they go through the development phase, they'll get sold to pension funds. There are actually not that many utilities that really, at the end of the day, own the assets of wind farms. I think as they are relatively profitable assets, that's another area where it could be stepped up. So I think that's a second area. The third area is really in looking at services. And that is a new concept for power companies, because they will be buying and selling customers from their power, buying and selling information, capacity, and I think that, from a return on asset, is a hugely profitable business for the utilities. So while it's an industry that's with a lot of change heading down its way, I think that with the right management and the right vision, they could make an extremely successful business model.
I want to challenge you. I don't think all the utilities already have the right management. I think the CEO of a company is supposed to take the decision, and we should look for ways to accelerate, because I think we run out of time. Yeah? I think we have to accelerate this transition, and we need to identify, and not only identify, develop the ideas, we have to execute it. I think we must do it faster.
I would agree. It's a management and DNA issue. So the mergers into the telecoms industries, which have been discussed, probably will happen. I think that will speed the process. We're working with one company where it's actually in a water utility, but it's run by an ex-internet entrepreneur. So there you start to see it, but granted, it's a very slow process. But when you have 1 or 2 power companies per country or economy start to break out, I do think the others will quickly follow, or just lag behind.
And we probably need a different understanding of the utility industry. I mean, we need the likes of Greenpeace Energy and so on, the innovative retailers that come to market, try and test new business models. But as Tilman said in his presentation just before, we also need basic infrastructure. And maybe this is the way that we need to separate out the utility industry, saying basic infrastructure that just needs to be there. If we like the power lines or not, we need them, but they need to be there. Somebody needs to operate them, and then we need innovation on top of that. So basically, basic infrastructure, then an overlay with innovation, challenge, fast-moving companies on top of that.
So my impression is, indeed, there are still a lot of question marks open, and I highlighted a little bit, how can we match, for example, the supply of the industry in Germany with high baseload and so on. There are several question marks, serious question marks, how to do it, which are not yet resolved. But the benefit of a summit like this showed plenty of good, intelligent ideas which all together can form a solution. Like this supply-demand management, Interiors and others are setting up. This is one component. The other component is to look for better, for swing producers for energy storage, sunfire, converting CO2 in hydrocarbons in periods where excess of renewable energy is cheaply available. We need to have plenty of these things, and this will give the solution to the question mark which we still have. We should not simply say it cannot be done, but we should be honest to say, for the time being, much work has to be done into this.
This conference has a little weakness because we don't have so much support from the big utilities yet. Yeah, and this is really the evident weakness, but we have a small utility almost who is supporting us. And I think I talked to Vattenfall, for example, innovation. There's a guy in Berlin, he was invited, RWE efficiency was invited, and they don't yet understand that at such conference you find really these good many solutions, and why don't they come? I think it's an attitude problem, right?
Yeah, I think though that what we're hearing, and we would agree with, so that if you look at the average capacity utilization of total power capacity today, it's about 50% depending on what country you're dealing with, because you will have a 50% swing in power usage during an average day. So that obviously brings into mind, big needs in storage, particularly with renewables, which we're very keen on. But I think from the simple, if you look at the smart grid and the investments there, put against the investments you won't need to make in new capacity, the trade-off is massive. You can go from a 50% capacity utilization to 70% fairly quickly and without a lot of pain. Which means, let's say in the case of the UK, just example, that means you wouldn't need to build a new 17 gigawatts of power, which would equate to about $30 to $40 billion. So one of the profitabilities that you could look at this is investment not having to be made by using the assets you have and the transmission lines and storage smarter. So I think that is part of the equation, and they're starting to get it. We talked with some of the power utilities, the UK government, all that process has been taken out of the regulator of Ofgem back into DEC, which is the Department of Energy, and they're trying to do that. But we would like to see it happen a lot quicker, but I think numbers like this, it's starting to take hold.
You wanted to?
Well, I mean, we are touching a lot of issues here, but maybe to come back on one issue, the question is, what is technical, what can we do technically now? And what is the problem of the willingness to do it? I think that this is a very complex system. When the first time it was on the wire that Angela Merkel wants to shut down 7 nuclear power stations immediately, I thought it's a joke. It must be a wrong news, because she was telling us all the time that this is the blackout, this is not working anymore, and they really turned it off. And we have now an increase of these forwards at the spot market of 0.3 cent per kilowatt hour. So the market not really responded. Of course it responded, and we have now to look whether we have more imports or we have more coal. We need to discuss this. But basically, technically, it was wrong to tell the people before the extension of lifetime that there will be a blackout, and Mr. Prüderle, he was also a very, very strong speaker on this horror scenario with what happened. So I want to focus on, we should really discuss what is technically possible, what can we do, and of course we have to talk about the costs. We have also to talk about the costs, for example, of Fukushima for the Japanese economy. First estimates about 100 billion euro.
I think it's by far too low.
Yep, they are.
It's only starting the real problem over there.
I mean, I'm not talking about the earthquake. I'm just talking about Fukushima. So, and a second part about the a third point about financing, we really have to line out a basement of transparency on the costs, the market costs, but also the costs the taxpayers already invested in nuclear power and coal. It's very important. I mean, I'm very open-minded to a market-based system to integrate renewables. But before we do that, we have to make a starting point, a baseline to say what nuclear powers, for example, gets from the taxpayers. And it is 4 cents per kilowatt hour, 4 cents for each kilowatt hour electricity right now. For renewable energy, we have now 3.5 as an overlay. It's too much, we know by now. It will decrease next year. But that's a very interesting discussion, and I hope we can step forward to make a transparency on the whole costs of each energy path.
First step in this direction is being made with the CO2 certificates, which have to be priced in the future, and which will correct the picture a little bit.
So now let's talk about nuclear. Should we have more or less nuclear power plants? How can we get out of nuclear? Is it possible? Is it feasible to get out of nuclear? Or, like Bill Gates and some other guys over there in the US, they want to reinvent nuclear. They want to invest billions of dollars to identify new ways of nuclear. So is nuclear, what is happening to nuclear?
From our view, I think we don't have an option. Nuclear is going to be here to stay. I think the plants that are being decommissioned, actually a lot of them will not be decommissioned. China's got 50 new ones that are being built. Those will continue to be built. The US has probably 2, which means the ones that they're going to decommission will actually get another 5 to 10 years life, like a Boeing 707. And it will have its safety issues because it's politically expedient. So I know in the wake of Japan and everything that's happened there, I think the reality will kick in that while we want to be green, you know, and we talk about efficiency levels increasing, that doesn't take into account the fact that our power needs are growing in Western Europe, in the US, as well as the emerging markets. So there really isn't a quick fix. We have a very big gap. Personally, I prefer renewables, but I think unless we want to burn a lot more coal, atomic power is here.
And you basically get the answer by combining the Kienbaum picture that we had in terms of the future generation mix with your comment just now, the non-emotional debate, the technical debate that we need to have, and then the conscious decision, demographic decision in terms of what do we have today, how can we take this forward, and what role does nuclear need to play? Because in the energy pact that we had before, it was basically saying, you know what, 2050, 80% of our electricity comes from outside of Germany. Now, what would that be? Is that all going to be renewables? Most likely not if we have our electricity coming from France. So that your pan-European, and this is why I like initiatives like Friends of the Supergrid, a pan-European picture of where do we get the energy, where is it being generated, and where is it going to be consumed. This debate is not yet finished.
Yeah, and if I may add another comment, the real problem is indeed not the question whether we need to have nuclear or not. I think technically it would be possible to replace nuclear through other sources. However, the key point is the competitiveness of economies and nations. Who can have electricity at what price, at which point in time available? And this is really the big challenge. If Germany is stepping out and is willing to accept higher energy prices and others don't, this gives a major problem in the competitiveness of the industries and economies. And so we need to have a much more coordinated approach in this, and this is going to start that we have to discuss this on an EU basis, at least on an EU basis, that is no longer a real only national topic, not only for risk and safety reasons, how it is discussed today, also in the light of competitiveness. And we have to bring it down to an ethical topic as well. We have to say, okay, if we want to get out of some risk, we should be prepared to say, it may cost us a little bit, but we take the decision we do not want to have that risk easily. And we can afford it. But then everyone has to do it.
So how well prepared are we here in the audience for the future? Who is interested and prepared to pay more for your electricity bill in your household? Like double it. Who would like to pay the double amount of money?
Okay, roll utilities.
I mean,
it will not be
we are not
needed.
talking about 5%. We talk about make it double, yeah, and then drink less beer and pay more for electricity. I think that's a fair trade-off, yeah.
But we don't need to double it.
No, just
definitely not.
Yeah, just a bit.
I have to remind that I was talking to
it would be
at the
good
beginning
for
that wind energy and solar power, they don't have market prices. You know, the variable costs are basically zero, and so we have to think in long-term dimensions. And we did this when we introduced nuclear power in Germany with an own ministry. The head was Franz Josef Strauss, and he was not heading for civil power. You know, I mean, he wanted to have the nuclear bomb. That's the basic reason in the 50s and 60s why the taxpayer installed a lot of nuclear research centers in Germany. And it was also a long-term thinking. The first kilowatt hours from a nuclear power, they were so expensive, much more expensive than solar power today per kilowatt hour, and it was no discussion at this point. To argue nuclear power is now a cheap way to produce a future cheap way to produce energy, I totally disagree. There's no new nuclear power station being built right now on a free market. In Finland, the customers of the electricity from this power, they are off taxes, so they are free of taxes. They don't have to pay taxes. That's the financial model of this nuclear power station. It is double as expensive as it was planned. In the U.S., the new power stations in the U.S. are supported by the Obama government. So there's really no nuclear power station being established in a free electricity market on real costs. And that's very interesting, and it has a reason why this is so. So I think the cost issue we have to discuss on a long-term scale, 20, 30 years, and we have to include all the costs the society is dealing with, including disposal of nuclear waste and everything, all this together.
I would agree with that, because also the oil industry actually receives more subsidies than the entire renewable industry globally today. Now, there's another political issue to this, which is if you look at countries like the UK or Mexico, which were net exporters of oil and gas, they are now going to be net importers, and it's going to create a very large balance of trade issue for them. Their economies will become under a lot of pressure. The US, for instance, imports $300 billion worth of oil every year. And we saw earlier that chart of 6 major exporters. If you were to do that, from an economic impact standpoint, that's the same as an economic stimulus that they put into place in 2009, every year going out into the future. And I think for countries all over the world, energy independence is a crucial issue for security, also for jobs. You don't have to import power, you can create it yourself, whether it's wind or solar, and that will take a long time. I think the other piece, we're slightly more optimistic in terms of the cost. We believe that we're only just at the start of this, and that the cost structures in the charts you've seen earlier will continue. We don't know where we're going in the cost, but if they're hitting parity now, they will go through parity. And if you look at long-term economic charts, growth follows the cheapness of fuel. And as we get independent on fuel and energy, I think we actually can look at a lot of growth off the back of that. So I think we're quite optimistic.
I have a cool idea. I remember last year the German big utilities published ads in German newspapers saying that nuclear is a pretty smart transition technology. What we should be doing as the Smart Green Economy Network here at the Ecosummit, we should publish a nice article to which you can all contribute your ideas and give all our ideas to the big utility companies, because we cannot, we are running out of time and I'm getting hungry.
You need fuel, you need energy.
Yeah, exactly, I need renewable energy, and I think I want to invite you to contribute your ideas. I volunteer to collect them. Please send us emails and we make a big story and then you can sign it. And we have to work on that problem with a lot of intelligence, with a lot of motivation. And then we want to see new competitors to Greenpeace Energy who even challenge you guys. And we don't want 100,000 customers. We need billions of customers who are only buying smart green economy electricity at a higher price and willing to consume less.
And I fully agree. We have seen so many innovative, smart, exciting ideas how to manage this in the future, and they need to be sold. There need to be much more awareness about this, need to be created. And I fully agree. You should take action, make that happen.
Okay. So we skip the questions from the audience now, because I think it's wonderful to discuss over lunch with these gentlemen. Please give them all a big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.